Hi, everyone. Um, I am Steve Lowe. I work at Deque here. I'm a web accessibility coach and a senior consultant. I've been working in digital accessibility since the mid '90s, and I'm really looking for and I'm really looking for, and I'm really looking and I'm really looking and I'm really looking forward to our conversation here. I do stutter, so at times I may get blocked, but I will get through to that. So thank you very much. And now let's hear from Justin.
Howdy, y'all. I'm Justin Yarbrough, also an accessibility coach here with DQ, also in the Austin area, just like Dave here. Um, Literally, we live like 5 minutes from each other. Um, I've worked in digital accessibility for about 6 years at a community college before joining DQ last year, and I'm blind. So yeah, that's just a tiny bit about me. And now over to Trudy.
Hi, everyone. We are glad you could join us for this session. I am a senior accessibility consultant and accessibility coach at DQ. To describe myself, I'm a white female. I use the pronouns she and her. I have long brown hair, I wear glasses, and I have multiple disabilities. I have one hand, my left hand, and I wear a prosthesis for my right hand, or I call it my hook. And it is manual operation. It's not myoelectric. It's not fancy. I also have persistent tinnitus, and it's constant. It's at 11,000 hertz, also known as 11 kilohertz, which causes a hearing deficiency. I probably have another disability, and I touch on this later. I just have never been tested for this. So for further physical description of myself, I also do have burn scars on my face, and I have no problem with this. It does not define me, and nor do my disabilities. So they just are a part of who I am. Back to you, Dave.
All right, thank you so much. I'm kind of watching the chat out of the corner of my eye, and there's a lot of other people listening that also have disabilities as well, which is great to hear from. A lot of people from Austin. Just there's a huge fan base coming through on the chat, so thank you so much. Today's session is going to be a panel discussion. These are the personal views of the panelists, and they definitely want your questions. So please put them in the questions tab as we go if you think of something that you want to ask. That's what this is all about. So let's get started with our first question. And that is, what attracted you to working in accessibility, or A11Y? Justin, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. As you'll hear from a lot of folks who work in accessibility, I definitely am a member of the club that kind of fell into accessibility by accident. It was definitely not something I thought I'd be doing. When I had started working at the community college that I was at before DQ, um, I had initially been hired just sort of out of the blue to help them out with screen reader testing for online course content. And I was like, okay, I can do this part-time with them while I'm finishing the paralegal degree I was working on. As part of my vocational rehab program after I'd lost my sight in my late 20s. And it was just as I started doing it, I fell in love with it. And well, here I am, 5, 6 years later, and doing this. And I really honestly couldn't dream of doing anything else. I just love the work. How about you, Steve?
Thanks, Justin. So I got started working in accessibility when like when I started a job at a consulting firm and began working on and began working for the Able Data Project, which was the first national database of assistive technology, just of assistive technology. Until that point, I really hadn't been involved in accessibility, but I learned both from the work that just from the work that I did about the breadth of different types of assistive technology, as well as working with both our user base as well as my co-workers who many of whom had a variety of disabilities. This was in the mid-90s, as I said, and there was this new thing called the World Wide Web. And when we decided to put our database online, I just kind of got assigned the job to make sure that people with all types of disabilities could use this. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was really fortunate. But I was very fortunate that I was able to just like meet some people along the way. Had some very good experiences at conferences like CSUN, and I really became engaged in how important it was to actually make the web and everything on the web accessible. I saw it every day, both for the PV people I worked with, as well as the PV people who simply needed to access who just needed to access the information that we offered at the Able Data Project. So it was an accident, but a very happy accident. How about you, Trudy?
Thanks, Steve. What attracted me to accessibility work in general is connecting the dots between having disabilities and having purpose, making a difference through it. I can relate personally to those who have felt marginalized or forgotten by having disabilities, or just by being or looking different. For digital accessibility, starting out, I worked in UX design and then front-end web development. And so at the time, along with my boss throwing me into training accessibility to all departments in my county, quite the introduction, right? The teacher learns. This was WCAG 1, by the way. So there was this natural progression toward digital accessibility work. And it doesn't really mean that I was totally on board with it right away, but, then later I led the accessibility initiative at a mid-sized Fortune 500 e-commerce company. And by then, accessibility work was a passion. I also attended a conference and I heard Derek Featherstone speak, and I attended year 1 of AXCON. This further set in place how I wanted to make an impact on an even larger scale. And now I work for Deque. So back to you, Dave.
All right. Thank you so much for those great answers. I just, before I go to the next one, I've got to say that the chat is blowing up. I've never seen it like this. There, 78 people have posted in the chat, or 78 lines, and it just keeps growing. People have disabilities too that are listening, and their stories just resonate with yours, and they're sharing theirs too. So this is just incredible. So I'm going to go to the next question. Does having a disability help you relate to the people you work with? And does having, kind of a twofold question, does having a disability help you relate to the people that your work is intended to help? Trudy, let's just kick it off and start with you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. For me, having disabilities does help me relate to the people I work with, mostly because I try to approach everyone I interact directly with as possibly having a unique need. I try to not make assumptions about people. What if the person I'm teaching or coaching has a disability themselves? Maybe they have ADHD and they can only focus for so long. So I try to hold shorter meetings with no more than maybe 2 or 3 points. Maybe they have another unseen or seen disability, and because we work remotely and cannot always see each other, we still might not know. And with respect to coaching people in their roles in the software development lifecycle, I believe having a disability, and by even sharing a bit of our story and by being ourselves, we can help others learn empathy that can ignite their own desire to create accessible experiences. What's great here is that this can result in not just doing their work out of being a requirement, but they too can desire to make a difference. And then, of course, for the end user who needs to use that website, I have empathy for them. And so it just causes me to dig deeper and make sure I'm considering them. Now, something I want to make clear here is it's not a requirement to have a disability to create this passion for accessibility work. I know plenty of people who do not have a disability and are on fire and are very effective for this great work. So I had to add that. Over to you, Justin.
All right. Yeah. So in my case, I would say definitely, having a disability definitely helps with like the folks I'm working with. It definitely helps with, when I'm working with like the developers and our testers and the analysts and all those other different roles we work with, is that, being being a screen reader user, and with so much of our work, being focused on especially screen readers, it kind of helps, I find, to help put a face, I guess, to the the work of, they get to, not only am I getting to like teach them these things, it's like, okay, this is, how you test with a screen reader. These are the things you want to think about with, doing these buttons, these links, all these, all the stuff that we're working with on the development side, is that I can also be, share with them that lived experience of, and this is why it matters. And from that bit too, I think it also does help with like, like I say, the people with disabilities, who our work benefits, because I've been them. I've been, in their shoes. I've been that guy who's frustrated as heck with some website that I can't get to, get past because some button doesn't work with the screen reader or something. I've been that person. So, I have those experiences, can share them, and definitely, understand what it's like, and help just drive home just how important the accessibility work we do is. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. So really, I think so I think got to appreciate accessibility for the web because of my experience with phones. As a stutterer, like basically using the phone can be really hard. People, they can't see you. So all they know is that you started to talk and suddenly there was this long pause. You may be making noises or just repeating the same sound, and they can't see that you're blocked and they don't know that you stutter, and it can be really hard. And when I started working for the Able Data Project, we were mainly a phone-based project, and we would so we would answer calls, and people would basically call and say, I'm looking for a product that does this. And we would walk them through. And one of the things that I think attracted me to that job in the first place was I got to speak with people who also had problems speaking on the phone because of whatever disability they happened to have. And one of the things that made me good at that, I think at that job, was that I had that like empathy, and knew just from my own experience how important it was to be patient and not try to rush them, and to treat them with respect. And that really and I think that experience translated into how important it was that people using the web have easy access to the information that they need. And it really did make me thoughtful about what makes a web experience accessible, and trying to just make sure that everything that I did was going to enhance accessibility as much as I could. So yeah. So Dave, let's move on.
All right. I love hearing these questions being answered by you guys. Thank you so much for doing this. How has disability shaped your professional experience before and beyond your current career in digital accessibility? Justin, let's start with you this time.
Sure. Before I had lost my sight, which is in my late 20s, I didn't do anything even like I say remotely close to the work I'm doing now. I worked at a call center as a analyst, analyzing staffing levels and monitoring that. So it was a job that, where I've got like multiple monitors up, and I've got, maybe 3 different windows that are changing data in real time that I'm looking at and monitoring to see how things are going. And frankly, that's just a job that, no matter what, as a screen reader, you just wouldn't be able to do it because there's so many different moving parts at once. And it just like I say, it just wouldn't be doable with a screen reader. But there was definitely, in my career of getting here, there was a lot of me just, maybe a little bit of just luck or being in the right place at the right time, whatever you want to call it. Is that, I had my first semester taking classes at that community college, I was having some issues with some courses. I went in to demo it real quick to basically show the folks there how to reproduce the issues I was having so they could work alongside the vendor that was responsible for the thing I was having trouble with to get it fixed. And as I say, a year later, they out of the blue offered me a job doing screen reader testing when they got the approval for it. And, kind of the rest is history. So it's really not something I ever thought I would be doing. And if I'd not lost my sight, it's definitely not something I'd be doing. I'd probably still be, staring at multiple monitors in some call center and trying to figure out how many people to give a half hour off so that they're not, I don't have agents that are sitting around getting paid to twiddle their thumbs. How about you, Steve?
So I've talked about this a little bit, but I think that, like, as I said, I didn't really start out looking for a career in just accessibility in general, or specifically digital accessibility. But once I got involved in it, I was just hooked. It's just I've been able to see firsthand through both my own experience, as well as the experience of friends, of just like friends and colleagues, how important it is to just have accessible experiences on the web. And I don't think at this point I would change a thing. And because, like you guys said, it was an accident, but it was certainly a happy accident. And I feel as if I just have found and I feel as if I've found an area that I just love. So how about you, Trudy?
Okay, thanks, Steve. Before my career in digital accessibility early on, I was probably feeling pretty limited about what I could even do working through college. I didn't want to work as a waitress because I just envisioned dropping plates on customers, and that would just be terrible. So, so I had a limited view, and then with the help of people, and I'll describe the situation, I started moving through that, and then I developed a determination. So I did later consider being a music teacher and had a music scholarship, and that leads to a next point for my personal life that I developed into fighting limitations, and to the point of being rather stubborn. I did have a gift of a music teacher, asked if I wanted to play an instrument. And I thought, well, yes. And so we found an instrument that was at the correct angle. So I learned to play the cello, and I held the bow with my hook. And then another limitation was set. There were limitations set on my driver's license, automatic transmission, and power steering. And I just thought, no, I wouldn't have it. So I tested out of these. And continuing with my professional life, now beyond my current career, my disabilities have helped me look at the world differently. So I just want to touch broadly here is we are all so diverse and beautiful in our diversities. And this next might sound unfathomable, and I would never say this can be true for everyone, but I've come to look at my disabilities as gifts. If disability can be transformed into a way of making a bigger difference in the world, then I'm really excited about that. I love to be a part of a much bigger picture. Back to you, Dave.
Wow. Do you feel obligated to advocate for accessibility? Like when you see accessibility being omitted or deprioritized, or like when you believe that a colleague with a disability is being excluded? Trudy, just keep on going.
Okay, Dave, thanks. Well, at work in DQ, we are obviously advocating every day. but I do feel the need to speak up and advocate for accessibility outside work as well. And this often comes out in conversations such as at a birthday party. I was once talking with a senior manager at a company. She's at a company. And I felt compelled to ask her if accessibility has been or is being implemented. And this started up a conversation, and she was going to look into it. So it just made me happy to get that going. And then as far as advocating for a colleague with a disability, I know I would. For someone with a disability that might be excluded, yes. I can just say that very simply, yes. Now on to you, Justin.
All right. I can't really think, as I run through things I've done in my mind, I can't really think of any like offhand instances where maybe I've allocated specifically for a coworker or advocated, excuse me, specifically for a coworker with a disability. But as far as for like advocating for accessibility and people with disabilities in general, I can think of like one really good example. Like last year, I got looped in and I had a discussion with one of the people that's working to organize my 20-year high school reunion for my graduating class. And they just wanted to basically like pick my brain and see, okay, how can we, as we're organizing this event, what can we do to, make it, welcoming for anyone with any type of disability? Because we were a really large graduating class. We had people with disabilities when, that graduated with us, and, definitely folks who, like especially, me being one example of it, people who, became disabled, by one thing or another, since graduation. And, they just wanted, pick my brain and get some advice on how to build an awesome and inclusive reunion weekend experience. And that's, one, like I say, the real example that kind of stands out for me. How about you, Steve?
Thanks, Justin. Yes, I do. I think I've always felt obligated. I think I've always felt obligated to advocate for just all types of accessibility. I have a couple of specific instances when I was working at People Data. Our offices were on the 9th floor, and during a fire drill, it became very clear that that's actually two of our staff members that two of our staff members who had CP and used a wheelchair, that they were not going to get down 9 flights of stairs in their wheelchairs. So I went to the property, and so I went to like the property manager and asked about evacuation wheelchairs that will allow for easy movement downstairs. And after a little back and forth, we actually got a pair of those in the office, and were able to make use of them when there was an actual fire on the floor. Not in our offices, but still, that was something. Another opportunity we had was actually, I was traveling with one of my colleagues who used a wheelchair to a conference at one of the hotels in Disney World, and they had a brand new conference center. And when we walked in, the manager, who was great, came in. He walked over to us and said, "Hey, our conference center's new. As you're going through it, if you see any problems with access, access for people in wheelchairs or anything else, please let me know." And we were back seeing him in about 15 minutes, in like 15 minutes, in like 15 minutes, because we went over to the conference space, and as soon as we got like over into that end of the building, they had brand new carpeting with thick padding, and that is like trying to roll in mud. And I and so we said, hey, we know you can't fix this now, but it's something you should think about. And I had the opportunity to go back to that hotel, not for work, about 2 or 3 years later, and they had pulled up all the pads, and it was just hard carpet. And so I felt like that they really heard us, and I hope that we helped people who actually uses that afterwards. So Dave?
So the thing that's running through my mind, Steve, is if you got 2 evacuation chairs and there were 3 people with CP, how did you pick which one was going to get left behind? Anyway, we could talk
We only
about
had
that
2,
one
Dave.
later.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said
Yeah.
you had 3,
No,
but
no,
okay.
2. I'm sorry. Yep.
Good
That's
thing.
good. Yeah, we drew. Yeah,
You drew
that
a
would be a
name.
tough choice. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So continuing on, what does inclusion look like where you work?
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Who gets this one? Justin.
It's like I feel like, especially like here at DQ, working here, that like inclusion is just so ingrained into the culture here, where it's something that we as a place, very very mindful of, very good about doing. I was just thinking about, mulling on this one, and I was thinking about like an event I attended through my previous job. Is we had sort of like a team building event that was held at a Top Golf. For anyone who's not familiar with it, it's one of those, like, you rent these stalls and it's kind of like a driving range, but not. There's, they gamify it, sort of. And like I just went up, with all the folk, my coworkers. They didn't think, okay, sure, Justin will take some swings. Why not? No, nothing phased. I mean, I even like, you know, they knew I was having a little struggle with like getting lined up and stuff. So actually one of my boss's boss at the time, actually would like help me get lined up, before I'm taking the swings. And that was just, like I say, that was just, part of just what we did. Is like, hey, we're gonna include him, we're gonna make this work. Even though, the funny thing I do think of with that is that as Michael was helping me out with that, my guide dog was over and eating guacamole off of his plate of food. um but that, while one of my other coworkers was watching my dog do this. But yeah, that's just, a matter of, so much. That's, what's been my experience, and I feel like I've really been just blessed to work at places that take that seriously. How about you, Steve?
So I've been blessed to work at several places that were that really that I think like really that I think really emphasized inclusion. And as far as what that looks like, I think in short, it's just recognizing and respecting the talent and the ability of everyone in the workplace, whether it's in person or remote. I've found that that it is there that there will almost always be someone who I either like underestimate them, or I don't really recognize how good that they are at their job at first, because I think we always learn that. So but I think that in short, that's what it includes in is as far as I am, for me. How about you, Trudy?
Hey, thank you, Steve. So these points for inclusion are what I see happening at work. As Steve mentioned, treating everyone with respect, allowing people time to think and answer questions, because allowing ability for more time to digest information before requesting a decision can help everyone. People use visual aids such as a picture or a graphic and include alternative text. Of course, the alt text helps those who cannot see, and visual aids can help someone who might have a cognitive issue or cannot process auditory information well. Or regarding learning styles, maybe they are a visual learner. And one more I can think of is people provide an auditory description of an image or a graphic, or they read steps aloud to others in case they have poor eyesight, are completely blind, or again, as far as learning styles, maybe they are an auditory learner. So back to you, Dave.
All right, Steve, if you could just stop sharing your screen.
I will.
We have plenty more questions on the slides, but I really want to take some time to get to some of these, oh my gosh, fantastic questions people are asking. Because I said, after all, this is their session, so we really want to open up the floor and ask some questions. One thing I've heard over and over at this conference is the term burnout, right? With accessibility, because we're all working so hard at doing this, and we're so passionate about it that a lot of times people get burnout. And one of the questions to this panel is, Nikki asked, I find that working in accessibility as a disabled person, it's hard to define where work stops because I live and breathe disability and accessibility issues. Now, for you, how do you separate out work from life? Trudy, I've heard you talk about this one already, so I'd love to hear your answer.
This is a good question. And considering I had been close to burnout at some point, I didn't know how to turn it off. And for me, it helps to just leave my office behind, find time to go take a walk, have a mental break, actually decide what you're going to do to stop and almost have a trigger to just turn it off. It is hard to turn it off, though, if it's just ingrained in you, right? But it's important. And this does bring up self-care. It's not just a girl thing. It's a guy thing, too. We do need to take care of ourselves and find ways to just unplug, read a book. I don't know if I'm answering the question well, but what about you, Steve?
Thanks, Trudy. Yeah, I also have learned the value of basically separating the workplace and home kind of the hard way. It's part of how I ended up at Deque. I think over at it's part of the way I ended up here at it's part of the way I ended up here at Adam like at Adam DQ. I had been pretty much allowing myself to be on call all the time. And because I was working on mainly projects having to do with accessibility, I would respond all the time. And I did just basically come in a burnout and I took a break for about six months or so. Knew I wanted to find a firm that really valued accessibility and would allow me to learn more and grow in that field. And here I am. How about you? And how about you, Justin?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, burnout can definitely be a challenge. I've felt pretty close to that, it at times in my time working in this field. The part that kind of really gets me sometimes when it just feels like sometimes maybe you feel like you're like, banging your head up against a wall, trying to get movement on something and it's just not happening. And that's kind of, the parts that would like really get to me. I've just had to learn really so much of it is the step away from it to, separate work life. Okay, at the end of the day, I shut down my laptop. I walk out of the home office, which, thankfully I am able to do like, a room that is like my home office. I hardly ever walk in it outside of work hours. That it's a great way of drawing that line. But I get off of work, I get done with this is I will probably, go fire up an audio book pretty quick after this and fall into that or, binge some Netflix, maybe, go cook myself a nice dinner or, do, plan some things with my wife. We'll maybe go, we'll talk about like, and then, making sure like when you're away from work, you're actually away from work. That's a big thing is like I will shut like, when I go on vacation, I shut off all my notifications for work related stuff and don't look at it. That's just a rule I, try to, enforce. I'm not going to say I'm 100% on about it, but I'm pretty good. And, that's, you kind of just have to learn and find your own ways to kind of create that balance between your work and your outside of work time.
Yeah, great. I don't know if you can see it, but over my shoulder, I have a sign on the wall that says Unplug. My wife bought that for me to remind me to, like, you just got to get off the computer sometimes. You got to unplug. And I think that, that's so important for us to do. I have another fantastic question that came in. And I know from working with you guys at DQ that we've talked about this before, time and time again. So it's going to be challenging for you to pick out one story. But I'm just going to ask you to talk about one time that well, the question is, what are your biggest, this is why I do this, moments, times where your work has given you a significant feeling of satisfaction? This happens all of the time. Steve, what's your story?
Oh, yeah, Dave, I think I have a good one here. So right when I began working in digital, in digital accessibility and was really just learning about HTML and coding and that type of thing. One of my coworkers, he had low vision and used a screen reader to just augment what he could see on the screen. And so we were working on our first website, and I was working with him to test it. And that was my first experience with the screen reader. And basically fixing our code so that he could use so that he could use our site, navigate between pages, search our database, easily access all of the information resources that we have, was great. And just it was one of my first experiences in person with digital digital accessibility, and really got me going. How about you, Justin?
Sure. I'm thinking the parts that is like really where it's just, this is why I do this for me, is just when I get to see people like, embrace it. The biggest example that stands out to me is like from my previous work at the community college. I will go ahead and give Rio Salado College a shout out. Working with in the area I did, we were focused on the online course content for our online courses. We were a primarily online institution. And, seeing like over my, almost 5 years there, just the culture shift from where it seemed like maybe sometimes we might have to be dragging faculty chairs kicking and screaming to dealing with this accessibility stuff, to getting them to the point where like some of them would proactively like actually come to us and go, oh, hey, I want to do this. I've got this neat new idea for something with one of the courses. How can I work with y'all? How do we go and make this accessible from the get-go? And just seeing that, that accessibility was becoming where it was, front of mind for these folks, and that they were thinking about, that experience for our disabled students, um, you know, while they were coming up with their ideas on how to teach, and, cool, things we could do with courses. That was just always really awesome to me. And just getting to see that, people were embracing it was really just what I loved so much about it. And what, it's having those kind of moments just is really kind of what keeps me going and why I love this so much. How about you, Trudy?
Okay, thanks, Justin. Mine is very similar to yours. It's when the light bulb goes on, and sometimes you'll have people that just don't get it, and they're fighting and kicking and screaming because it costs money, takes time, but in the end, it's so worth it. And in the end, also, it's going to save you money. It's going to save you time to integrate accessibility. But when that light comes on for someone and you're sharing a screen reader experience, you're doing a demo, or you're doing a demo of, usually it's screen reader, or you're demoing walking through a site with a keyboard only, and suddenly someone just gets it. And I had an experience like that where someone says, oh my gosh, I understand. This is more than just for people who are blind. This is for people who can't move very well. And so this person went on to become a champion for accessibility. So moments like that it just sets my heart a little on fire, and I get really excited. And so like you, Justin, Steve, you alluded to it too, but yeah, that's what it is for me. And this is it. This is why we do this.
Oh man, just awesome stuff, folks. Thank you so much. gosh, there's so many appreciations going out in the chat of people saying thank you, and they just feel enlightened, and it's so good to know about some of the people that accessibility is helping, not just in day-to-day life, but actually in the workplace. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to answer my questions, answer the people's questions that are on this session. I have to say there's like 250 chats about people talking about their own life stories. I wish we could open it up. I wish we could just sit around a round table and have a huge discussion. But this has just been so enlightening. Thank you all so much. Thank
you,
you
Dave.
to everybody that's attended AXCON 2023. There's still one more session to catch, so let's get off to it, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.